You're listening to The Granite Discourse, a New Hampshire-based podcast with real discussions. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And for early access, subscribe to Patreon for just $1 a month. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Well, okay.
Mike Belcher. Welcome back.
Thank you. From number 2 to number 36.
Yeah.
Good work.
Thank you.
I love it.
How have things been?
Things have been good. Busy, but good. Got a 1-year-old running around home, my daughter, keeping me extremely busy, loving every minute of it. It's really good. Legislative season is just winding down now, so I should have a little bit of free time, except it seems like almost every appliance that has water in it decided to explode in my house in the last couple of weeks, so I'm doing a lot of I'm repairing and replacing everything right now. So very busy, but good.
How was this legislative session for you?
Oh, it was a mixed bag. I mean, don't get me wrong, we got some good stuff done. And if you look at things now compared to when we started, things are better. Though I'm the more maximalist, believe that we really should have got more done. We have a GOP trifecta. There's a lot more that we could have gotten done, but we stepped on our own toes a little bit. So I'd like to see us improve on that in the future.
How can we do that?
Well, we need to hear from you guys. We need to hear from the base. We need to hear that you expect us to go take no prisoners. We expect us to go do what we promised to do, the party platform. And we really, from a more on our side of things perspective, I would like to see the powers that be utilize their powers a lot less to try to crush the outliers to the right, and utilize those powers instead to shift the middle to the right, which is where our base is, so we can actually pass and uphold all sorts of good legislation and policies from protecting, women and girls to education reform and beyond.
So you're saying that we have a little too much infighting going on right now?
Yeah, there's a little too much infighting, but I mean, it's sort of a perpetual thing. It's always, sort of establishment against the outliers. But we do see the same thing, a little bit of the same thing in New Hampshire that you see, in DC, which is there is power and there is ability to move people. There are certain pressure points that can be brought to bear on people. But you almost only ever see those pressure points being used to bring people toward the center, never to bring the center toward the base.
Mm-hmm. Some people would say that the left has done a great job at moving a lot more center people to the right on their own.
Well, you're not wrong. They have so far overreached with so many things. Honestly, one of the few saving graces I have for the upcoming election, because we are dealing with some headwinds, one of the few real saving graces is they are so historically unpopular that I think they may have more depressed turnout than we do. So of course, that's baked into their ideology, though. They can't stop. They are on principle against limiting principles. So there is no brake, there is no off switch, there is only gas for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it goes.
So you've been pretty busy, and somehow with your busy schedule, you found time to write a book.
I did. And really what I did is I brought together all of my writings over a number of years, bundled it into a coherent picture with a single, thread that can be pulled through the whole thing. And it is, it defines everything that I'm doing and trying to do in politics and in my social life, in my church, everywhere I go. This book that it describes what I'm doing and why. And it's very difficult for me to talk about like a short sentence, like what is it about?
We got plenty of time.
I know. Well, that's good because I can't tell you in a sentence what it's about. But I can tell you in a little bit more than a sentence, it's about pulling together every disparate field of thought, from philosophy to theology to policy to just utility, what's going on, history, current events, in order to help people understand what the left and the right really are, what they represent, and why they do the things that they do. And believe it or not, there is 2,400 thereabouts years of history showing you exactly what the left is and what they're doing. Now, let me start off by saying the left is not a political ideology or movement. It's not any one thing you can put in a pen and say this is what it is. It is an all-encompassing, totalizing religious system, all the way from metaphysics and presuppositions through the actual act of doing things in the real world. Everything the left is doing is religiously based, religiously oriented, and it has its origin point, at least in paper, in Plato and the works of Plato, his Republic, his Symposium, his Timaeus. You can put it all together. In fact, to put a little finer point on that, every communist revolution in history, in fact, that includes the French Revolution, by the way, because the French Revolution was really the first or proto-communist revolution. But every single one of them is just enacting books 6 and 7 of Plato's Republic. That's all it is. If you read that, it's all there. The censorship is there. The cultural revolution, the idea that you need to prevent transmission of culture from parent to child, is there. Plato says you've got to remove the kids from the parents and raise them communally. They can never know their parents, right? You have to censor all of the old information, all of the mythology, right? You have to censor Homer, is what Socrates was talking about. That would be roughly equivalent to censoring the Bible today, right? That's the founding mythology of Greece, was Homer's works. You'll find every last piece of communist revolution, including how they play out, in the works of Plato.
It's interesting.
It is, and it's more than interesting, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea and think that this is some kind of philosophical treatise. Like, it's not like I'm not some historian who looked into this stuff and thought, oh, isn't this interesting? I recognized a playbook in everything that's going on. Like, this is how they actually do things in the real world. Everything you see right now falling apart all around you, our institutions crumbling, right? Our medical professions that can't determine what a man or a woman is. The outrageous science that has been behind things like vaccines, especially the COVID vaccine, right? The whole idea that you have to censor, the idea that you have to put out this mythology, the idea that you can't question these certain things.
Would you say that this is on purpose, or do you think this is human nature as far as society goes as we evolve?
So there's a little bit of both, but it is
like the fourth turning
significantly on. Well, I have my own idea about that. Actually, the fourth turning idea is this idea that history is cyclical, and it takes 200-ish years for empires to fall. That's a bunch of silly stuff right there. The reality is, what people are calling the fourth turning is about how long it takes all the corrupting forces that have to do with Platonism to infect a society, destroy its institutions, and collapse it on itself. And it's not cyclical. It's not a necessity that it be cyclical, because history is not cyclical. History is more or less a straight line from creation to end. But I can understand why people would see that and think that. But it doesn't require a cult or a weird explanation. It's just, how long does it take the forces that bring Platonism to bear to corrupt a society and topple it? And those forces are wholly incentive, right? You've got people who want power. How do you get power? Plato wrote that book. How do you get power? Plato's works are and have been used over and over again throughout history as a recipe book for how to corrupt government and institutions toward regime change and elevating a new class of oligarchs to control things. That's what it's all about, right? That's what I describe in my book in unbelievable depth, like more depth than you probably would ever want. But I have to prove it because it's a very controversial claim. Most people, go to college, they learn about Plato, a little bit about Socrates, and they come away thinking, oh, this guy is a world-beating genius philosopher and ethicist who talks about, how to build this great, perfect society, and a very deep thinker. Actually, none of that's especially true. None of the more especially deep thinkers, or good for that matter. For instance, the classic line goes that Socrates was executed because he ran afoul of the bad people, and they executed them. No. Socrates was executed on the charge of impiety and corrupting the youth. Specifically, what he was an oligarch who, just like the revolutionaries of our day, the far left-wingers, he wanted to censor the founding documents, the mythos, the Homer, his Iliad, and all that. And he wanted to import different gods from Egypt and the mystery schools, the mystery religions. And he corrupted the youth, not just by teaching them these things, but specifically through a enforced system of pederasty and pedophilia that was common among the elite oligarch class. It was a bonding mechanism and a control mechanism that they used. And this is talked about at length in Plato's Symposium. That's why he was executed. He was executed because he was the teacher and co-conspirator of the overthrow of Athenian democracy by the 30 tyrants. Now, that didn't last long. It was only a few years when they came back to power. And they couldn't execute him based on that because they gave everyone amnesty in order to not have a war, basically. But they were always in the back of their mind. They knew that Socrates was behind trying to overthrow their system of government and bring about tyranny. And he didn't stop. He kept going. So all of the stuff you learn about in college about how he was such a great philosopher and good guy, that is a bunch of nonsense. He wasn't an especially good philosopher, although I would question what a good philosopher actually looks like, because philosophy is not necessarily a great thing. But that's what he did, and that's why he was executed. And it was this line of doing what he did and replicating this oligarchic sort of conspiracy throughout history that has brought us to the same point today that Athens was at.
So the name of your book is called Counterspell.
Yes.
And the subtitle is A Field Manual for the Counter-Revolution.
Right.
Now, who is continuing this throughout civilization?
Sure. So the namesake Counterspell is also the namesake of the business project I started. It's all about the idea that in a different time, the lies that we see being out there, the people who are being manipulated by bad information, who are having their thoughts controlled through that manipulation of information, that would have been known as a spell. So to counterspell of the namesake is putting a stop to that.
I like it.
So people can see what is real and what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So who is doing this? Well, I think there's a natural inclination in the people to have this, what they call libido dominandi, or this lust to dominate. And they want power, and they want wealth, and they want all these different things, right? Well, some people are actually in a position to get that if they're born in a certain circumstances, if they wind up in certain circumstances. So who has done this historically? Well, if Plato, if I'm correct, and I very much believe I am, and I think I prove it in the book, if Plato was the one transmitting this playbook through history, well, what did Plato start that would have transmitted these ideas?
School.
He started the academy, right? So the academy arose as a way to transmit these ideas and this mechanism for control and regime change throughout history. Now, when Plato kind of lost traction for a while and Aristotle was more dominant. Platonic philosophy was kept alive in the Arab lands for hundreds of years. In fact, that was the milieu that Islam was created in.
Oh, really?
It was a Platonic milieu, which I believe is why you see actually elements of Greek pederasty retained in some Islamic countries. Things like Bakabazi you see in Iraq. Anyway, so that was transmitted back to the West into Europe in the sort of medieval period when a guy translated what's called the Corpus Hermeticum and also Plato's works into the European languages. And it became very popular almost instantly with aristocracy and the elites, right? So we're once again transmitting this knowledge through schools.
Mystery schools.
Mystery schools is one way to put it, but not just mystery schools. It turns out more or less any school they take over will become a mystery school.
Okay.
Because they will transmit these presuppositions, these ideas through anything they conquer.
So universities, as we know them, are transmitting this.
This day, yes, universities are, at least to some degree, transmitting at least some of these ideas.
Do you think they were in the earlier days?
It depends on which ones you're talking about.
Like, let's say, like the founding of Harvard.
No, because the founding of Harvard was strictly theological Protestant. It was founded as a seminary. But it didn't take a long time for it to become tainted and then conquered by this esoteric Platonism. And it changed its entire outlook within a number of decades. So that is what is happening. I mean, this basically, to summarize it, Plato's playbook is a systematic design for taking over institutions like a virus and using them to spread itself. And it appeals to the very worst in human nature. It appeals to the desire to dominate, the desire for wealth and power beyond what is earned, and it causes rampant corruption. And it tears everything down.
What would you say the first step is?
To taking over?
Yeah.
Well, his ideas have been sharpened considerably by social theorists over time. So I could refer you to a communist tactic called entryism, which is a very simple idea. It's the idea that communists will they will get one or two of their members, a knowing, trained member, communist, into an organization. And then from within that organization, they will become the most vocal and angry minority. And they will demand that people who are not like them not be let in. And over time, those demands add up and they start bringing in only more people who are like them. So they close the door to non-communists and they let more communists in. Once they hit a certain threshold of people and they can control things, they'll actually take control of an organization, whole cloth, and they will begin expending the long-earned legitimacy of that organization to advance their own ideas, which we see all around us. When we see our medical associations or any professional associations out there, our institutions, it's the old phrase, progressives will hollow out your institution and wear it as a skin suit. It's the same idea. They will hollow out your institution of the legitimate functions of it, use it, and rapidly expend its credibility to advance its own ideas, its own revolutionary ideas. But in doing so, it does delegitimize the institution that it captures.
So where in our society do you think it started in America?
Oh, that's a tough one. So I've thought about this a lot, trying to put a pen in where things transition, because America was started as a very unique and really cool place. This idea of a constitutional republic, right? The idea is based on, at least largely based on, Aristotle's idea of a polity. And in this system of government doesn't have all power. Government is limited. It's only allowed to do certain things. In this system of government, the citizens are armed, and there is no necessarily standing army. The citizens are called up to defense, And because of that, there can be no easy centralization of power, right? In a republic, because the government is limited, you're not supposed to be able to take things from one person and give them to another, because that's theft, right? So all of these things are the exact opposite of the system of government known as a democracy. A democracy, to go back to the Athenian democracy that Plato was in and a part of, I'm going to diverge, a small diversion. So Plato saw the rise of the 30 tyrants, the oligarchs who took power in the democracy, and he saw the democracy lash back at them and destroy them. Okay, it didn't last long. But Plato still wanted to create this recipe for how to bring about power to the oligarchs. How do you turn a democracy into an oligarchy? Actually, it's very easy. Democracy is an extremely easy system of government to manipulate. You have to have factions, right? Factions are divided. The demos are divided, and they have these ideologues rise up in order to champion their cause, right? And these ideologues are effectively oligarchs, right? It's a very easy system of government to manipulate by control of information, by lies, and by the incentive structure that it establishes. Because in a democracy, there's no restraints on government. Government can do anything it wants as long as there's a bare majority of people who agree. So that bare majority of people have every incentive to steal from the minority and take what they want. In fact, in Athenian democracy, it was not even uncommon that the majority would simply order that the minority go be executed for no good reason.
Really?
Yes, this happened. Like, this was a thing. This is the nature of democracy. And our founding fathers understood that was the nature of democracy. They didn't want a democracy. You read the Federalist Papers, read the Anti-Federalist Papers, read the philosophers of the day, read Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, where it guarantees a republican form of government to each state in the Union. So everybody understood at that time that democracy was a awful, awful thing. Perhaps the worst system of government possible, because it aligns incentives so in an evil way. So, when did it become normalized? It only took a few decades before the birth of the Democratic Party. You have a broad-based knowledge among the founders that democracy is an awful, no good, evil thing. And then it's a few decades later, they're starting to normalize the idea of democracy. And that's where I would put a pin in some of the beginnings of this, because it took a long time to normalize the idea of democracy, right? In order that people understood that their liberties were safe in a republic because there was something over government. Government was not it, right? I have right here the Appeal to Heaven flag that George Washington flew. There is something over government, meaning government has to answer to something. But in a democracy, it doesn't answer to anything. So the information operation that began to normalize the idea of democracy was obviously already started within decades of the founding. Then you have the catastrophe of the Civil War and then the Reconstruction era afterward. That set the stage for the wholesale destruction of the form of government known as a constitutional republic and its replacement properly with a democracy. And that happened largely under Woodrow Wilson.
So do you think that the Civil War itself was part of that playbook that you're talking about?
I wouldn't go that far. I couldn't make that argument based on evidence. Whether at the end of the day, whether it was or had nothing to do with it, maybe I'll look into that at some point. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, I don't think, because it brought us to where we wound up, which was the progressive era, which overthrew the system of government we had and instituted a democracy. And you can look at all the things that align with that happened as a part of that era, right? The government is supposed to be limited. It's supposed to be limited in what it can do. It can't just take from you. But then there was the income tax amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Government is supposed to be disinterested in the culture, more or less, right? It doesn't exist to uphold culture. Culture is supposed to do that itself. but it began enforcing culture. It took over education. What was previously the charge of parents and religious institutions suddenly was forcibly the role of government. And they, in my book, goes in depth in this, how they imported specifically the Prussian system of education. And in the Prussian system of education was specifically designed to create citizens under a government as God model, right? The whole Prussian system of government can be summarized by Hegel. Hegel, his idea is the state is the divine idea as it exists on earth, aka the state is God, right? This was the Prussian model, and the Prussian model was wholly based on Plato and the esoterica of Hermeticism, which came from Plato. So that's where we officially transition. Now people are going to say, well, what we had a revolution 100 years ago? What about what's happening now? Well, we had a revolution about 100 years ago, and that's why everything is happening now. Because we're currently on maybe the fourth or fifth iteration of this revolution, and we've gotten to the point where, as I said, it takes a certain amount of time for these Platonic ideas and policies to break and corrupt a country before it starts to fall apart. We're only noticing because things are falling apart, but this has been going on for quite a while.
The decline of America.
Yes.
Where else on the world stage can you see this? Are there, like, let's say China, are they affected by this?
So, yes. So, as I said, every communist revolution in history has just been a repeat of Plato's ideas. Mm-hmm. Book 6 and 7 of Republic, his Timaeus, is the sort of cosmological operating system, which is the religious, spiritual component of it all. So yes, everywhere that you see communism or leftism broadly, it is in fact this ancient Egyptian/Greek religion asserting itself through terrible means of institutional capture and corruption.
I've heard a lot of leftists say that China's not a real communist country anymore.
Yeah, so they like to say stuff like that. In fact, if you dig down when a leftist says it's not real communism, they're pulling a little bit of a word game. Because technically, if you look at Marx's whole layout of history, that he said there's 6 stages, right? And the 6th stage, the final stage of history, is communism. It's kind of like heaven for leftists, right? So you could technically say, well, communism hasn't been tried, or there is no real communism because we've never entered stage 6 of history, because it doesn't exist. It's not real. Socialism is what they call stage 5 of history, by the way. So there's no difference between socialism and communism ideology or policy. It's just that socialism has to come first, according to the theory of history.
And capitalism before that.
And capitalism is supposedly before socialism, right? So socialism is the revolution that gets you from capitalism, and socialism is defined as the state basically where you have to force communism. You have to use the weapons of the state to coerce people to learn how to be good communists. And only once they learn how to be good communists will it become natural. I mean, believe it or not, the end stage of communist theory is anarchy. They honestly, well, I would say, I don't know if they honestly believe, but they, according to their theory, at the end of history, once communism is ushered in, there will be no need for government, and government will just dissolve, and people will live in a hierarchy-less utopia without government, right? So that's why they say communism has never been tried. We never got there. Well, no kidding, we've never got there. It's not possible, right?
So that's why I see communists with red and black flags.
Yes, there is actually there's no distinction between anarchy and communism in that regard. There's no problem mixing those two ideas because they are the same according to communist theory.
But they don't seem like they would be the same to me.
Well, that's because you're looking at the difference between reality and theory, right? The reality is you try to do communism, and all you get is a bigger, more powerful, more corrupt, and less useful government.
Yeah,
it never just collapses and goes away.
It's useful to the people that control it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
The oligarchs.
What stage are we in?
We're not, because that whole idea of...
No, I mean, as far as the field manual.
Oh, what stage are we? Well, so we had a revolution that nobody ever heard of, right? It overthrew American constitutional Republican form of government, and it inserted democracy in its place. And this was 100 years ago.
And we're
now in the maybe fifth. It depends on how you define it, but probably fifth-ish.
What was the defining moment of that revolution?
It was technically it was the presidency of Woodrow Wilson and all of his policies, because that is what fundamentally transformed American government from a republic or polity, according to Aristotle, to a system of government where the government itself is elevated to the position of God. It can do whatever it wants. It can reach into your pocket and take your money. It can say you're not allowed to have guns because we don't trust the citizens with guns. We're going to educate your children. That's not your job anymore. We're going to do that.
So this is also the establishment of the Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve is a part of it. Eugenics was a huge part of it. If you read Plato, he was very, very detailed about the eugenics regime that they needed in their ideal.
What did he say about eugenics?
So he had an idea of eugenics that has actually been lost a little bit to history. His idea of eugenics was based on the composition of people's souls being either mixed with gold, silver, or iron or bronze. And he believed that only gold tier people should be mating together to produce more gold people, and silver people should be allowed to mate, and they'll mostly produce silver people. Every now and then a gold person will pop up and they can be elevated to the oligarch class, but overwhelmingly most people, the iron class, they don't deserve to procreate. They should have their children killed if they do manage to have any. They can just go off, and we'll tell them that we're sending them off to the fields where they're going to live a nice life. But, of course, they're not actually going to do that. They're going to kill them. That was the Platonic regime, because he believed that only by cultivating the golden philosopher kings could you ascend spiritually toward the realm of forms. It's a very weird idea, but it's actually where you see, I don't know if you can see it, the image on the front of my book. It's a gold ingot being crushed between an iron hammer and an iron anvil.
Okay.
So a little symbolism there.
So as far as the education system goes, it came from the Prussian
model. So I go into extreme depth with receipts to show you how this was transitioned. Horace Mann, Dewey, Wilson, they were all philosophical education theorists, right? And they were over the moon about the philosopher Hegel and the Prussian system of education.
Which was imported here just after the Civil War.
That's when it really started showing up. It continued its sort of plateau up until probably the 1920 period thereabouts. And then it started, kind of settling over time.
I think Massachusetts was the first one to start public school.
It was, yes. And it was, it's one of the hardest things to explain to people, because so many people look back and they have these weird ideas like, we had such a good education system for so long and Massachusetts was the model, and we just, no, we didn't. We never should have taken education away from the parents and the religious institutions or civil society organizations that the parents were directing them to in the first place.
That's why they had to use the militia to walk kids to school, because it was such an unpopular idea.
Well, that's all. It's part of the reason that they actually neutered the militia in the Dick Act that created the National Guard and effectively took away each state's military.
And gave it to the
federal government, which is something that has never actually, I don't think, gone to the Supreme Court before. But it's a weird little factoid about the National Guard, that actually the only reason the National Guard exists is because the progressives didn't want each state to have its own military under its control anymore.
Mm-hmm. So would the Defend the Guard movement, would that help?
Yeah, so that's the biggest reason I was a big proponent of Defend the Guard. Not the only reason, but the biggest reason is because we ought to be taking control as a sovereign state of our own military again. It should not be something that just can be activated at a whim by the federal government. It's like, I give this example. It's like, if I have a buddy who tells me he has a Corvette, and I'm like, oh, cool. Want to take me for a ride? Because no, I don't have the keys right now. Well, where are the keys? Like, my parents have them. Like, why do your parents have your keys? Well, they pay for it. Well, okay. Your parents have the keys. They pay for it. You don't have a Corvette. Exactly. And I could say the same thing about our military at the state. You don't actually have a military because the feds pay for it and they have the keys.
Yeah, if we ever had an oppressive federal government that we thought we had to defend ourselves from with the National Guard, we wouldn't be able to.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I give you another scenario where maybe we face a long-running, slow invasion / setting up on our critical infrastructure by a nation, let's call it China, that is also infiltrating our elites through elite capture operations that include blackmail and bribery and all that. And now, instead of having to take over and bribe and control every 50 state militia, they only have to control one federal military.
Does the UN play a big role in this?
The UN plays a very weird role in this, right? So the UN is also sort of a product of this same ideology coming up around the same time. Right?
Yeah, and there was a big push of eugenics in the UN.
Oh, of course. Right. So the UN, like I said, it actually is based on Platonic ideology.
Yeah, and there's like the people that I know that the DNA test for babies right now has been a big discussion because recently there was some influencer couple that aborted their baby because they took a test.
I saw that.
The genetic test. And people don't realize that the genetic testing, some of those companies have partnerships with the World Economic Forum and the United Nations.
Well, that's not a fact that I knew coming in here, but it wouldn't surprise me in the least. I mean, the United Nations is founded on Platonic ideas toward the Platonic spiritual goal of oneism, the idea that at the end of history, all things will be reabsorbed into the one, the mind of God, this, that, and the other. It's a weird idea, but basically it means transcending distinctions, right? You have to get past distinctions and make everything uniform, everything the same. Well, part of that is you can't have nationalism because nations are not uniform. They want one world government. They want one world religion under this whole paradigm. That's part of the driving force behind Platonism and the sort of cosmology of it. So the UN was founded on these ideas. It actually it was associated with Theosophy, Helena Blavatsky, Annie Besant, and these other weird occultists from the mid to late 1800s.
Like Aleister Crowley?
Aleister Crowley was adjacent to these people, yes. I don't know if he was a theosophist specifically, but he was at least in the same sort of, the same space.
Cult. Yeah. Now, is there, like I asked before, is this a conscious movement? Like, do they understand themselves that they're worshiping or they're following?
No, for most part, no. They're just like any cult, right? And this can be reasonably and accurately described as a cult. There's going to be different layers of that onion.
So
right?
The people at the top of it, though.
Well, the people at the top are the people I would call it the innermost layer of the onion. And those people, I hate to totally guess at the key to people's hearts and what they truly, truly deep down think. But if I had to guess, I would guess at the innermost level, they probably don't actively believe a lot of the spiritual stuff, but they understand that this is a tried and true and successful regime change mechanism that will bring them power and wealth.
Okay.
Then you get to the outer school, right? That's the inner circle. Then you've got a little further out the onion, you've got the outer school. These are the people who read the theory, who understand that these are the true believers, right? And depending on which flavor of onion we're talking about, these might be your communist community organizers. They might be your progressive young Hegelians of the 1900s. They might be your new thought occultists like Oprah Winfrey. So these are the true believers.
The useful idiots.
That's one way to put it, yeah. That's the inner school. That's what they call them sometimes.
So Stalin called them.
Yeah, and Stalin was definitely the inner circle, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who is at the top right now?
I think it would be an error to say there is a top. I think this is not something that needs a top because the manner in which they spread their ideology and their theology and all that, they just print it. They put it out. It's all over the place. Mm-hmm. And in that way, it's significantly decentralized. Like you can have upstarts all over the place that are running in the same direction with these ideas, even if they call themselves different things or don't look exactly the same.
So this isn't centralized then? I
don't think it is. Now you could make a claim that there has historically been some centralization. The Soviet Union and their United Front was a massive centralization. Now the Soviet Union's gone, but all those United Front groups that they stood up are not gone. A lot of them are still operating under various flavors of communist theory, still doing the same kind of stuff.
Now, right? We were talking earlier, and you were saying that some of these groups still exist in the United States today.
Oh, absolutely. They exist in New Hampshire. They exist in the U.S. They exist across Europe. They're the same people who were out there protesting and trying to shut down peaceful nuclear energy because it was in the Soviet Union's interest for us to not have that, right? Mm-hmm. And these days, they are still doing things that are in the interest of Russia, China, oftentimes called the Global South, which is the sort of alliance of Marxist countries. A lot of them are in Central South America.
How about the media that we have right now, corporate media?
Well, the big thing about these groups, as we talked about, is their ability to conquer and take over institutions. Now, I don't know what American media was founded to be. I just don't know. But I know what it became. It became the mouthpiece of Platonism, Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, communism, leftism, whatever you want to call it. It became an actor pushing in the same direction through the institution that it had. And they have no qualms. For instance, I mean, you see this all the time in media, right? You see it all the time that media has no problem with the censorship of other media if it's pushing in a different direction.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right? That's one dead giveaway. They are not running a Republican institution. They are running a entryist, communist sort of playbook.
Do you think this is why we're seeing so many different fractures on the right now?
That's a significant part of it. So this is one of the biggest problems we face, is how fractured we're becoming as a nation on the right. And a lot of it is based on purposeful information operations. And the origin point of a lot of those information operations are in Marxist entities, whether that be proper Marxist entities like, the Cuban intelligence or Venezuela up until perhaps recently. Venezuela was a big point in all of this, whether it comes from China, whether it's coming out of the old Russian things, or whether it's coming out of the vestigial organs of the Soviet Union that remain here, all of these United Front groups that continue to operate along the same narratives that communism has always operated under.
They seem to have a lot of power.
They do, and they're very good at confusing people and preying on sort of the worst instincts of people and preying on the sort of vulnerabilities of people. Now, I don't like using the word conspiracy theory because conspiracy theory actually, from my research, dates to a CIA operation where they wanted to discredit people who were noticing things that were going weird.
Right? On the Kennedy assassination.
And some other things, yeah. But even without the term, there is this sort of idea that if you start attributing everything to conspiracy rather than looking for more simple explanations such as emergent phenomena or different groups pushing in the same direction because they have similar ideas, you can really jump down some rabbit holes and get yourself into trouble. So you have to be careful and exercise a lot of discernment when you're evaluating these things. But right now, they're dividing the heck out of us on.
Well, that's tough because when you see so many corporations and so many news media outlets all getting on the same page when it comes to social movements that we've seen over the last several years. It really looks coordinated.
It is coordinated. It's a conspiracy. Just because some things aren't a conspiracy doesn't mean nothing's a conspiracy, right? And it's out in the open. Look at the Human Rights Campaign, for instance. Human Rights Campaign is an organization that has existed for a while, and they've basically been operating as a sort of
You're talking about an actual group, not just a movement.
No, Human Rights Campaign is an actual organization. And what they did was they grouped up with certain big financiers. And they said, well, we're going to start scoring you based on your human rights score, right? And we're going to, if you don't, promote trans ideology and leftism and anti-Christian ideology, if you don't do these things, we're going to score you low. And if you get scored low, you might just lose access to loans and financing because we have friends at the banks. Now, in any other context, this should be looked at as corrupt racketeering, illegal activity. But they got away with it mostly because of under a leftist administration, nobody wanted to look too hard at them. But this is how they conquered and made all these institutions come out in favor of leftism, of sterilizing and mutilating and abusing children. It wasn't like all these corporations suddenly had an incentive, shift over to ideology. And they said, well, we're going to be ideologically leftist now. No, they were incentively shifted for them by effectively a cartel of big money and these groups like the Human Rights Campaign, who established a conspiracy because this was what they planned to do to try to move all of American culture, the Cultural Revolution, as you might call it, along by forcing this behavior.
How much influence is in TikTok?
I don't think there's as much as there used to be, but there's still an unfortunate amount.
Social media in general.
Well, that's a different thing altogether because social media is our best friend and worst enemy. Right?
Are there platforms you trust and platforms you don't trust?
No, there's platforms I don't trust, and there's platforms I don't trust more.
Okay.
But where I usually am found on X or it was Twitter, that doesn't mean that it's good information. In fact, the algorithm has been so bad lately that I almost can't stand it. But if you follow good people who know what they're doing, if you exercise discernment, you can get good information, and you can compare that with other information, and you can sort of make sense of things. But if you allow yourself to be fed by the algorithm, you are going to be lobotomized by it.
You're going to be eating AI slop.
It's not going to be good for anyone.
It's been tough with social media, like on X, especially because I felt like for a little bit there, it was nothing but AI videos.
I still feel like a lot of it's just that.
And yeah, you can't trust any of it now.
No, and AI is getting to the point where genuinely can be difficult to determine real or not. I mean, I think we're past the point where everyone on AI has 7 fingers. I don't think that's the thing anymore.
No, they're getting better.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing this in New Hampshire, how bad is it?
The AI part?
No, back to your book.
Back to the. So, it's everywhere. I mean, it's not. We're in a unique time in history because we see a confluence of these actors, not even just all over the United States, but all over the world. Look at what's happening over recent days in the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, for instance. You see these massive uprisings against this forced immigration policy where they've been replacing the native population, subjecting the native population to outrageous levels of violence and criminality, and refusing to properly deal with that criminality, and instead turning the law on the natives who notice it. Now that is Plato all over. That is exactly how these things happen through history. In fact, Aristotle described the tyrant as preferring the company of foreigners to his own citizens because citizens make a claim against him and foreigners do not. They also noted, this is the ancient Greeks, they noted that by bringing in populations of foreigners, you can effectively divide a population and prevent it from ever being able to rise up against the rulers.
Why is that?
Because there's differences between people. The reality is multiculturalism is not possible. When cultures come into direct contact with each other for an extended period of time, they go to war. It's not a multiculture. It's one wins and one loses. And it's not hard to predict that behavior. And people are divisible along so many different lines. It's really unfortunate. But the reality is, if you import a population that is hostile to your present population, you can virtually guarantee that they'll go to war with each other. And as long as they're at war with each other, they can't be at war with the powers that be. They just don't have the ability.
But the native population, some of them support multiculturalism.
Oh, sure.
So
there's all kinds of true believers out there.
There's more infighting locally that allows that to happen to begin with.
Right. In fact, I mean, the great irony is I was thinking about this earlier. They didn't really, I don't think they probably had to import this massive Islamic population into Northern Ireland to create this problem. They probably could have just kept exploiting the Protestant Catholic divide and kept them fighting forever. They probably could have, but I think they just follow in this playbook, and they're importing this foreign population, and now they actually have the Catholics and the Protestants united against the foreign population. So I don't have high hopes for what I see over there as far as them restoring Europe to a free place. It's just too far down the road. But I think that the powers that be did make a mistake with what they've done lately.
And what
they didn't need to import that huge foreign population into Northern Ireland in particular. Maybe some other European states that makes sense in order to divide them. They didn't have to do it there, but they did it there, and now they've actually united the factions at home against them. So
you think that this migrant crisis is not? You think that it's
not organic at all.
It's manufactured.
It's 100% manufactured. It's manufactured by the powers that be. I keep saying the powers that be. It's because I don't like to guess at necessarily who all these sort of powers that be are. I can name some of them. The Fabians, aka the Labour Party, is one of them. The big multinational NGOs that have been responsible for bringing in, like Catholic Charities and otherwise, bringing in huge numbers of illegals or immigrants, however you want to call it. The word immigrant doesn't mean much these days because they've basically taken away the normal immigration pathway that produced American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And they've just instead done mass immigration where people don't adapt American sort of ideals, and they instead retain their foreign ethnic conflicts and everything else.
But a lot of these people that have migrated, they've migrated because their home countries have been destabilized.
In some cases, I would say that's true of some of them. In most cases, they're just economic migrants. They just came here to make more money, send that money back, bring more people over.
But in Europe, a lot of them are coming from Syria, right?
Well, some of them are. I wouldn't say a lot of them. I think a lot of them are from other places. But some of them, sure, are from places that have been destabilized.
Do you think that the military-industrial complex has played a hand in this?
Oh, they've certainly played a hand. Whether they were a willing participant trying to do this, I'm not certain. But it's doubtless that the effect of some of the things that they've done have driven this.
It's convenient for the Platonists.
Well, yeah, it's very convenient for the people who want to import foreign hordes into Europe that, neoliberals and neocons have gone to war probably unnecessary ways, toppled countries, Libya comes to mind, that has caused some of the waves of migration. I mean, it looks pretty darned coordinated from the outside. I just don't have the proof to make the claim that it is coordinated. And I don't want to make the claim if I don't have the proof.
So the political structure of America right now, you have the left, the centrists, and the right, but the right seems very fractured. Yes. Do you think the left has any?
No, this is one of the things I really get into in the book too, is why it looks this way and why it is this way. So the left operates, even though they're very different in a lot of, compare your average pro-Palestinian to your queer. these should not get along, you wouldn't think, but they do, because there is an actual underlying metaphysical system, an underlying set of presuppositions, and a structure in place that allows them to all push in the same direction. On the right, however, we are divided because we fundamentally have all kinds of different people, and it's easy to divide us. You have people like me. I'm a devout Christian, Protestant. I believe that we ought to be doing certain things in government because of the transcendent ethic, right? People have rights because God ordained it that way. Other people have different ideas. They think that maybe rights come from evolutionary theory. Or maybe some people I've seen this argument from a lot of libertarians, rights aren't real. They don't really exist, but they can be socially legitimated by enough people who say they're real.
Okay. Government.
Right.
Now you're saying government grants rights.
Well, yeah, basically. I mean, which is astute of you, because that is essentially the same thing the left says, except for they think they can beat the left in their own game. They can't, by the way. But we have these fundamental differences, and they're easy to exploit to keep us from being able to unite effectively. It's the same principle as importing a foreign population, right? If you have different ideas about things, it's easy to divide you.
It seemed like after the 2024 election that the right in America was fairly unified, even more so where you had people like Tulsi Gabbard in the administration, RFK Jr. in the administration, that people felt like there was going to be real change at the federal level.
There was certainly a palpable sense of everyone being able to momentarily push in the same direction.
Yeah, so what happened with that?
Information warfare happened to that. We see it all around us. We see people falling left and right for some of the worst and oldest theories of ethnic sort of weirdness. We see it in people who want to blame a certain group of people for everything based on, I don't know, skin color or their history.
Do you think the Charlie Kirk assassination was a catalyst for that fracture?
I don't think it was a purposeful catalyst for it. I think it played into it by ushering in massive demoralization.
Yeah.
Because there has been little price paid by the left for what happened. By all accounts, everything I'm seeing, they were able to assassinate Charlie Kirk. And I say they, and I don't just single out this one person, who I do believe did it. I know a lot of people don't believe. I believe that one guy probably did it. And I believe that he was probably affiliated with that Antifa group that was trained by Cuban intelligence recently. Okay, so I think that's probably what happened. Great, I lost my train of thought. So
we're talking about the fracture on the right.
Yeah, so the reality is that event, it happened, and everyone was uniting, and then the info ops started happening, and everyone was dividing. And now there's a whole slate of people, and this is one of the ugliest things I think I've ever seen in my life. There's a whole slate of people who seem to be convinced that Charlie Kirk's wife had a hand in what happened. And I just can't understand that. When the obvious answer is right before our eyes, that we know that there is a connection to Antifa, when we know that there is a connection to Cuban intelligence, when we know that the guy is on video, when we know all of these things, and we know a little bit about Charlie and his family, and the idea that some other conspiracy, some other dark group of people did this and not the obvious answer, it's exemplary of how far people have gotten lost. Because when people don't have traditional sources of information to turn to, like the media, that they can trust, sometimes they lose all sense of bearing. And I can blame the media just as much for this as anyone else, because the media did this. They lost their own credibility. They burned it by doing awful information warfare against conservatives for years and years and years and years. So everyone, I think, had a hand in this. But like I said, the whole Charlie Kirk thing, it's exemplary of the broader set of operations that are happening right now that are dividing us that shouldn't be.
I think that you're right that the shooter was probably connected to some sort of left-wing organization. And for some reason, they're not telling us that.
Oh, we learned that. We learned that within days of the event. We learned that there was an apparent. Now they're not going to tell us everything because there's a trial going on.
Yeah.
So they're not going to taint the jury and wind up with this guy walking because they said too much.
Have there been other arrests?
I don't know if there have been other arrests, but I do know that there are investigations. Now, it appears that this group, Salt Lake City Queers, was the group, or Salt Lake City Armed Queers. It was the group that he had a connection to. And one of the leaders of this group is documented with a connection to Cuban intelligence. Apparently, this group had just recently traveled to Cuba and received some kind of training in Cuba. So we'll see what comes of it, but I think we're going to learn a lot more during and after the trial, because there's only so much that can be said, unfortunately, while there is an ongoing prosecution without risking letting this guy off the hook on a technicality or a tainted jury charge or something.
How much of what you have written about, how much of that, of this revolution, this communist movement, how much of it is influenced by Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals?
Well, Saul was a player. He wasn't a main player. I mean, he was following marching orders for the most part, right? He was a organizer, receiving orders from the Comintern, the Communist International Party. Right. He stood up the Industrial Areas Foundation, which is the first major interfaith movement in America, because the communists have a great interest in interfaith, bringing all faiths together toward a common faith. Because again, Platonism, oneism, everything kind of at the end of time becoming one again. He also wrote Rules for Radicals, obviously, which was very popular. He happened to dedicate his book, sarcastically or not, to Lucifer.
That's right. Yeah.
But today they've much sharpened his ideas. His ideas were very good and they were very useful, but these days you have, people call it theater kid occupied government. You have no idea how right you are. Until you have read the book Beautiful Trouble, you have no idea how much this is theater kid driven.
What are some of the things that you talk about in your book that people can do to counter this revolution?
Sure. So, and this is where it gets important, because this is what distinguishes what I'm trying to do from just theory. I'm not interested in just theory. I don't want to be a historian who documents, this is why this happened and now we're done. I want to win. I come to win, right? So the reason I wrote this book in the first place was because you need to understand the totality of what brought us here and what we're up against. Right? Sun Tzu, know thy enemy. If you know yourself and you know your enemy, you need not be afraid of the result of 1,000 battles. Right? By knowing the enemy, you're going to learn certain things. You're going to learn that the most potent weapon that they have used for over 2,000 years is laughing at you. It's taboo. It's making you believe that you're dumb and you don't have the standing to argue against them. But at the end of the day, what they really do is they wrap up all their religion in the word science. The science that they refer to when they're using that term is not the science that you think of when you think of the scientific method. Their science dates back through the term scientia, through the term episteme, and carries with it the esoteric religion of Platonism. It carries with it the idea that the world is not really knowable because it's not real and we have to transcend it. That's where alchemy comes from. They practice alchemy, not real science, which is why when you see all these medical associations and institutions throwing away their credibility on nonsense, you think to yourself, well, this isn't science. What are they doing? Well, of course it's not science. It's alchemy. It's what Plato did. It's what his disciples have done ever since. But the reason that's so important to understand is that when they stand up above you and look down on you and they say, we have science, you just have an opinion. No. They have a religious zealotry. And you have, well, maybe it's an opinion, maybe it's a religion, maybe it's whatever it is, but you're on the same level as them. It's the same thing, it's the same playing field. They don't get to stand above you and say, this is my credential, I'm science, I am the science, as Anthony Fauci said. They don't get to do that because that's not how it works. You have just as much standing and authority to fight back against them, to demand your way as they do theirs. And your way is better. I guess you about guarantee it. Our way is better. I know that.
Do you think that there's enough pushback now to prevent another COVID from happening?
No.
So they have the use of government, they have the use of force that gives them their science religion.
So I think that COVID was a sort of enzymatic reaction that sped everything up, but it wasn't necessary for the whole thing. And I think that there is enough people waking up that it would be hard to pull one over on the whole population like they did back then.
Could in the cities, I bet. They
probably could. And part of the thing people always think is, we have to get to a majority. We have to get to 51% to win. No, we don't. Every major accomplishment in history in politics has been accomplished with as little as 3% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need 50%. You need 3, maybe 4% who are activated and fighting back. That's all it takes. You don't need to get everybody. You don't need every person out there who you think is lost to all of a sudden wake up.
And
put my book in their hands and maybe they will wake up. But most importantly, you need the elites to be on your side. You need the people who are making policy, the people who have votes in legislature. You need them to understand this stuff, because once they get it, then the left doesn't have a leg to stand on anymore.
How many elites do you think do get it?
Not many. But it's increasing, though. And that's one of the biggest reasons I wrote this book. Not everybody in the world needs to know everything in this book, right? But in particular, elites and people who want to make a big difference, they need what's in this book. I would go as far as to say, you will not win this fight without it.
The left, the people on the left, I think, do understand that you don't need a majority to win.
Right. Very much.
That's why we can always call them the vocal minority.
Yes, and they do that by magnifying their power, by multiplying it past what they ought to have. And again, it's the same mechanism. It's institutional capture. I mean, there's a technical term for it called institutional counter-hegemony, which is a Marxist phrase for how they do this takeover. They take over the organization, then they use its power to advance their revolution and take over more organizations. And that's how they go about things. So they swing way above their weight when it comes to how many of them are actually true believers. Because the little known secret here is once you get the incentives in society to align in a certain direction, the majority just falls into place behind it. Whether that's the craziness of transgender ideology or whether that's the sort of founding basis of the Christian transcendent ethic of America. Once you get a certain percent, and mostly it's elites behind it, the rest of people fall into place for the most part, because that's the way the incentives align, and it becomes the path of least resistance for them.
How old were you when you started going down this road?
That's hard to say. I was raised, as I've said before on here, on the left, right? And I only started coming over to the right in my 20s and then really in my 30s. And it took me at least a decade or more of heavy-duty research to understand all this, where it came from, what was important, what wasn't important. I owe a big debt to a few guys. So Steve Coughlin, Unconstrained Analytics, Rich Higgins, the guys who wrote the report, Re-Remembering the Misremembered Left. They were intelligence professionals in government. They wrote this report. It was incredible. There are some areas I disagree with on them, but it was a major break for me that helped get me down some of these rabbit holes and into the right reading that really made everything click.
And when you were starting to make that transformation, did you find yourself starting to see like conspiracies where there weren't conspiracies? And did you ever have to pull yourself back and like check yourself?
Sure. I mean, so I think everyone, when they lose touch with what they once believed was true, they find themselves kind of floating.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a scary thing. And part of that fear will drive you to grab onto anything you can get a hold of that explains things.
Yeah.
And gives you an orientation. Right. So there is that. And I mean, this is why, like, when I first started moving over from the left, I'm like, no, this is wrong. I gotta move. Well, the easiest thing for me to grab onto was libertarianism. Yeah. So I probably identified as a libertarian for, half a dozen years or so. As I was kind of figuring out, at that point, I probably would have been a center-left libertarian. But it still didn't work with me. I still kept finding contradictions and things that didn't work right. And it wasn't until I came all the way to, finding God, finding Christ, going to church, and realizing that this is the transcendent ethic that exists, that is above God. I'm sorry, not above God, above government. It is above people. It is above the church. And it governs all things. And it brings all things together in a way where you can actually live a consistent, meaningful, good life productively and be on the right path and win ultimately.
Is this why communists are typically atheists?
Yeah, so that's whether or not they're atheists. It depends on exactly how you define atheists. But what they have always said is that Christianity is the main target for communism. I think it was Gramsci who said, communism is a religion that must overcome the Christian West. So they understand that they have to displace Christianity because there's nothing that stops a immanent movement such as a government as God movement more than a belief in the real God who sits above government.
Was there anything that was being the Platoists? Am I saying that right?
Platonists or
Platonists.
Platonists or whatever.
What was the target before Christianity existed?
Well, in the days of Plato, the founding mythology of Athenian democracy was the works of Homer and the Greek gods. And again, Socrates was executed in no small part for denying Homer and the Greek gods and bringing other gods in.
So how long did it take you to write this book?
Well, from the time I decided I was going to produce a book to actually producing the book and putting it out was a couple months.
That's quick.
That was quick, but it's only because I had already done the writing and research over 12 or 13 years. And I pulled it all together, retrofit everything together, did more research, added more, made sure it flowed so it was a coherent argument from beginning to end. But most of the material, strictly speaking, existed.
Now, did you learn anything that you didn't know when you started putting the book together?
Sure, because in order to make the book, it exists at two levels, right? It exists as a level where it's easy enough for the average person to read that they can pick it up and go at it. But there's also a very academic component to it because it's going to face scrutiny and allegations of being wrong by academics. So I had to really go in depth to prove some of these things. And part of that process of going in depth brought me down some really weird rabbit holes, like understanding we talked about the whole pederasty component, right? Because I needed to conclusively link, as I do in the book, the Platonic oligarchic control and bonding mechanism of pederasty to what Epstein was doing. And in order to do that, I had to go through reading about the boys' schools in Old England that explicitly recreated a Greek environment by encouraging and doing pederasty between men and boys and older boys and younger boys. This was a part of that. And a lot of these were feeder schools into what were effectively intelligence agencies. And this is, I mean, you go back to the CIA, for instance, the predecessor organization to the CIA was the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. He wasn't a founding member, but he was an early member and a prominent one of the OSS was Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse, father of the New Left, German communist, who came here after the rise of Hitler, or during the rise of Hitler, in order to escape that, and immediately was welcomed to Columbia University and welcomed into our intelligence services, where he helped to establish the communist faction within American government and the American intelligence services. And it's not that hard a needle to thread to see this introduction of these techniques and ideas into, I mean, Herbert Marcuse himself wrote in his book, Eros and Civilization, that the road to higher society has always led through the true love of boys. He was unashamedly promoting what the Greeks were doing, right? So you track this idea to the modern Epstein thing, and what was he up to? Well, pederasty and pedophilia to control elites. I mean, it's not a conspiracy at this point. It's open. We know, and we've had members of the royal family have to step down from their position for their association with this, right? It's a real thing. Why was he doing it? Well, it's a process that has its claws back thousands of years in history.
Just for control, that aspect of it?
Control and bonding. So it was a bonding mechanism that Socrates would bring in one of these young boys, and it was an introduction into the world of the oligarchs, into the world where you would one day be looking to seize power for yourself and the privileges that come with it.
It's grooming culture.
Yes, it is very much a grooming culture. And it wasn't just the Greeks. There were other people in that region that were doing this also.
So that would mean that there's probably another generation that was groomed by the Epstein aged.
I would not bet a penny that this practice of what he was up to has stopped.
Right.
I mean, look just through what we know about recent history. I mean, we've got the Epstein thing. You go back a little further, you've got the Kincora Boys Home in Northern Ireland, where it would appear that British intelligence was running a brothel of a boys' home to both do entrapment and other things, apparently, among the elites.
Well, wasn't there a scandal in the White House in the 80s, too?
There may be. I'm not immediately familiar with it, but
it only took you a few months to write this book out.
It took me a few months to pull it together and edit it and expand it.
Yeah.
But from the core material.
Self-published?
Yep. It's available on Amazon, hard copy, paperback, and ebook version. I've been meaning to do an audiobook version, but as soon as I started recording it, I got real sick and lost my voice. My voice is actually still recovering from that, so hopefully soon I'll be able to start recording the audiobook version.
What's the reception to the book, Ben? Have you had anybody that's read it that have that you might have opened their eyes?
Oh, I think so. I've had multiple people reach out to me and tell me that like it's unbelievable to them what they didn't know. I had somebody last night tell me it's as if I pulled a rabbit out of a hat. That the way that it puts things together in a way that all of the weird questions that you have dangling about why this, it brings it all into a coherent picture.
How much of what Yuri Bezmenov was saying is true?
I think a lot of it was essentially true. I mean, what terms he used versus other people used, I mean, I don't know. But he was, from all appearances, a genuine KGB or KGB adjacent actor who was responsible for active measures and information warfare.
Do you think that he was genuinely trying to warn people?
Probably. You can always make the argument that he was a demoralization agent or something like that. But what I find is when it comes to those really extreme particulars, I don't go down those rabbit holes because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
What do you think the biggest example of like of this communist revolution? Like, what is the biggest example that you've seen, like personally in your life, not just on TV, but like in your actual life? Like you're in politics, so
yeah. Well, it's. I mean, it doesn't have to be this huge sharp thing that makes me think, oh, this is it. It's a thousand
part of it.
Normal things.
Yeah.
Like when I'm in my education committee and I'm having to argue from the first principles that, parents get to direct the upbringing of their children. They're not the state. They don't belong to the state. We don't get to assume parents are guilty of anything and investigate them just because we think that they're better off in the hands of the state. None of those things are legitimate, but there's a party, the Democratic Party, that is whole hog on those things. They basically want to throw you in jail if you want to homeschool your kid because they think you must be an abusive maniac. And when you question them on it, like you get down to the real reason that they don't want you homeschooling your kid or doing something like that, it's very clear. They know deep down that that the parents will not transmit their values, the leftist values, to their children. And they can't have that. They deep down, they understand that they need that transmission pipeline that is the school system to constantly generate new generations of confused children who will be reliably not just leftist voters, but leftist cannon fodder in their cultural revolution. Every new generation. They need that. Without that, Lenin said something to the effect of, give me a child for 4 years and I'll never leave. They understand the need to indoctrinate children into their beliefs when they're young.
It's pretty widespread because I remember in 2017 when there was the Unite the Right rally.
Mm-hmm.
And
SPLC funded.
Exactly. That just came out, right?
Yep.
And so would you say that those are one of those organizations that are tied up in this?
Absolutely.
So when I was I went down to Boston because it was a free speech rally that happened in the earlier in 2017. The Unite the Right rally happens, and then there was supposed to be another free speech rally, and these were just a couple of high school kids that were going into college that were organizing this. It started off as a small thing, but the Antifa people caught wind of it and started making threats against these kids for wanting to have a free speech rally. Mm-hmm. So the first rally happened, and Antifa said, oh, we're going to show up and we're going to counter this. So I think it was 3%ers got involved. The Proud Boys got involved, and so there was a good showing on the right to defend these kids' right to speak and promote the idea that the federal government, what they wanted was they wanted to end discrimination against Republicans in college. Mm-hmm. So that was their push. They were young; they were like 18.
Sure,
and everything went fine. There was no real issues. Boston police was there keeping the peace.
Yep.
And that was, I think, in the spring. Unite the Right rally happens, and that just swept the nation.
Yeah.
And all these right-wing protesters were labeled as basically Nazis.
Oh, yeah.
And they were having the free speech people were having another rally in Boston, and that was scheduled like 2 or 3 weeks after that Unite the Right one. And what happened was Marty Walsh went on TV and said, we don't want Nazis in our city. Mm-hmm. We don't want you here, is what he said. And what happened with that was they had their rally. Boston police had to cordon off the gazebo down in the Boston Common.
Yep.
And they were surrounded by thousands of people that were protesting Nazis. And if you knew who was in the gazebo, they weren't Nazis. They were young kids. There was one guy that was running for Congress, I think, or Senate. Sure. He was running against Elizabeth Warren. He was actually Indian. So there were people of color in there. There was all these people on the right that were all from, all these demographics. But I remember being in the crowd because I couldn't get into the gazebo because I was going to videotape. And I remember standing next to this old lady, and she was like, "Oh, the poor little Nazis, they can't have their rally." And so what happened was the police ended up taking all those people out and escorting them out. So everybody just started cheering. And I mean, there's thousands of people surrounding this for like 15, 20 people that are in that gazebo. And then the police came back out and they took down that group's American flags. And when they took those down, everybody cheered.
Yep.
And after that, those people that were in the gazebo ended up having to get escorted out in an armed vehicle. And Antifa was there trying to stop it. Black Bloc, Antifa, whatever you want to call them. And after they had left, there was a parade of leftists that came in. And there was something like 40,000 people that showed up to protest this.
Yeah.
I don't know where they found 40,000 people to protest it, but when I was looking around, there were people that were part of the Socialist Party of the United States, the Communist Party. And then there were, when they were having their parade, they were handing out copies of the communist newspaper. Yeah. And that was when I first learned of the, there was a...
pamphlets?
It was an actual newspaper.
Well, but was it called pamphlets? Because that's one of them.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Wish I still had it, but what it was promoting was on November 4th, 2017, they were going to start protesting in every major city until Pence and Trump stepped down. So, and that's basically what happened in 2020. So when I saw that happening, I was making that connection with those groups. Like, so all of this is funded.
It's complicated, but it's funny because all the things you just said, it brings to mind about a dozen different known policies, tactics, techniques, and procedures that are used by the left. The first policy that comes to mind is repressive tolerance. It's another idea that was formulated by Herbert Marcuse, although it's really always been there, but he put a name to it. The idea is you must tolerate all movements from the left, even to the extent of violence, because they lead to utopia. And you must oppress or stop all movements from the right, even if it's just speech, because they all lead to fascism, which is a joke. That isn't true at all. But that's the essence of repressive tolerance, right? And then you've got the other issue. Let's talk about how these events were funded. The tragedy itself was part of, an event that was funded in Charlottesville. That kicked this whole thing off, right? Well, that's exactly why they do this. There's within their ideology, their academia, there's this concept called conflict theory, right? And they understand in the terms of conflict theory that there are these explosive moments in history, tragedy or big things happen, and when those things happen, it is a opportunity to rapidly shift the culture and the government. Okay? So it's a rapid opportunity for revolutionary action.
Don't let tragedy go to waste.
Right. So if those events are opportunities for them, why would they not seek to engineer those events? And in fact, they do, right? And then another idea comes to mind, the idea of open communications or open planning, right? So all you have to see is, this guy Walsh coming out and saying, we don't want these Nazis here. What was he actually communicating with that? Well, he was communicating to all these leftist groups that you were going to be given a long leash to do what you want to do. We're not going to, it's the same as the peaceful protest op, right? You keep hearing peaceful protest. Everywhere you look, everything's on fire. Right? It's open communications. It's what they're saying is we're not going to bring the law to bear against you. We're going to allow you to operate against them. And we're going to create this moment, right? And we're going to frame them up as being these terrible people. Now, maybe they were terrible people in the Unite the Right. I don't actually know that much about who was there. So maybe they were, maybe they weren't. It doesn't really matter. And it doesn't matter to them either, because no matter who it is, they're going to make it out like they're the worst people, like they're Nazis, like they're all these terrible things. Nazis, by the way, are weird left-wingers. That's also exposed in this book. Nazis, National Socialists, get their ideology from Helena Blavatsky and some others, which is the same thread. It's the exact same thread of this weird esoteric religion that gave rise to the United Nations. They just went in different directions with it. Okay? So all these different things come to mind. These planning techniques, the way that they operate in public, the way that they manipulate the culture, the information, in order to do the things they want to do. They're very good at it.
When I saw that with my own two eyes. Saw tens of thousands of people, and I saw these groups and organizations. But then when I saw the newspaper the next day, and I saw it on Facebook, people were making posts about how tens of thousands of people showed up to shut down Nazis, and it's like, no, they showed up to shut down free speech. That's what they did, and they succeeded at it that day.
And what is the effect of them putting those newspaper things out? The effect is, well, now there's more people who believe that there's these weird Nazis and there's this big counter movement, and they can be a part of this generation's civil rights fight, and they can come out and protest, and they can be a part of this. And that is how they generate the energy behind color revolutions.
Yeah.
Which is what they're actively pursuing right now as we head toward 2028.
Oh, and I think it was it's been 15 years or so that I can remember them starting to call Nazis right wing.
Yeah. Well, it's the same trick they did when they, convinced all of America that we were a democracy, and that's great.
Well, if you're a communist, then a Nazi's probably right wing to you, right?
Well, kind of. It's you might at that point the left right thing almost doesn't make sense at that point, because really the right left thing derives from the French Parliament, right?
Yeah.
So it was the communists of the French. They didn't call themselves communists. They called themselves Jacobins.
Yeah.
Right. They were the ones on the left side of Parliament. They were the leftists.
Yeah.
And then there was a whole group of different kinds of people on the right that included, the royalists who wanted the monarchy. Then there was even the sort of mild revolutionaries who wanted, a republic, a constitutional republic. They were on the right, just kind of like today, right? You've got all kinds of different people on the right. On the left, they're pretty united behind, this radical leftism.
It's crazy. It's crazy to see.
It is. And it's so dangerous. So dangerous.
It makes you worry. It makes me worry about how the future of our country is going to go.
Well, that's the reason I dedicated my book to my daughter. And the whole thing about my book, it isn't that we have to be perfect. It isn't that we have to win every single fight 100% of the time, always. It doesn't mean that we have to make the perfect the enemy of the good. But we have to do enough. If we don't do enough, we're going to lose everything.
Yeah.
If we do enough, we can retain what we have and continue to build on that. We have to do enough.
Do you feel like when you do act that it's enough for the left to pull back, but ultimately they're just biding their time? You have to be vigilant.
Yeah. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, right?
Right.
But the point is to always keep them on the back foot. Yeah. Never let them attack. Never let them assume a stance of attack. Always attack into the ambush and put them on the back foot. Because if you're on the back foot, it's like that saying goes in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. And that's true, because nuance doesn't work well in politics and in messaging. So you have to actually keep them on the back foot. And it's not that hard to do, because most of what they do is pretty evil. If you argue from first principles, the idea that there is, a real ethics that actually matter, and they're doing things like taking away, children from their parents, they're sterilizing children, they're doing radical things. It's not hard to put them on the back foot if you're willing to make those arguments. One of the biggest things that stands in the way of that is this whole awful culture of respectability politics. The idea that if we go too hard against the other side, we're not respectable, and we have to take it easy. We have to love everyone and be kind to everyone.
I don't feel like that's universal when it comes to politics.
No, but that tends to be the reigning paradigm of people in leadership. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it's institutional. The idea that once you're in charge of an institution, you have to sort of play neutral, and you have to sort of you want to play neutral.
You're always worried about the next election.
Well, that too. But the reality is, if we get crushed this November, especially in New Hampshire, if we get crushed, it won't be because the Democrats beat us. It will be because we beat ourselves, and we didn't deliver enough to our base to turn them out. That's the end of it. We promise a lot, and we delivered some of it. We did some really good things. We prevented some really bad things. But we could have given them more, and we should have given them more.
Yeah. So, Mike, tell everybody where they can find your book again.
Yeah, thank you. So, the book is Counterspell, a field manual to the counter-revolution. It's available on Amazon in all but audio format. That will be forthcoming. You can find my business website, counterspellgroup.com, and my re-election website, because that's now a thing. I have to run again to be elected to the House, which I hope I am. Mike Belcher 4nh.com.
And you can take donations for your campaign on that website?
I can. Yes, I can. And I would much, much appreciate it, because this will be the hardest election, I think, so far. Even though I'm in a pretty good conservative area, there's a lot of headwinds we're fighting against in this one.
What term will this be if you win?
If I win, it'll be my third term, and I've got some big plans.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Forward to seeing what you got in mind.
Oh, yes.
Mike, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be back and a pleasure.
Thank you for the book as well.
Oh, very welcome.
All right.
Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.